Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, September 26th, 2025. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
And senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
So there are two opinions in the world. There actually seems to only be one opinion in the world and then a kind of attitude. And the opinion in the world is that the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey ranges from being absurd to being the beginning of the end of our republic. And then the attitude is the hell with Comey. And the idea that the Justice Department is only just now being weaponized to punish the enemies of the sitting president is so preposterous that giving that any credence once again shows a desire to hold Donald Trump, a man who does not hold anybody to any particular standards, to a standard that they hold nobody else to, is ongoing. And I am very confused, I will admit, because people that I really respect, Andy McCarthy of National Review in particular, say that if the indictment is what he thinks it is, it's absurd. That senior people in the prosecutorial wing of the Justice Department have refused to take this up, have said it's a bad case, and that it does not hold water. And therefore, this could be a slippery slope. We can discuss that in a minute. And then I come at it with, I listened to Comey under oath, talking to Lindsey Graham in 2020 before the Senate, saying he had no knowledge of any FBI effort to investigate the Trump campaign through Crossfire Hurricane. And we know now, because of release of papers by Tulsi Gabbard, that is at a very minimum untrue. And we know that James Baker, his loyal assistant, said under oath that he was under the impression that the order that was given him to do this investigating didn't come from Comey. It came from Comey's deputy, or like, I don't know, amanuensis, but that he understood that it had come from Comey. Now, he didn't have a piece of paper from Comey. It's my right hand doesn't know what my left hand is doing for 30 years, as Hunsaker says in The Sweet Smell of Success. But that certainly seems like he did it, and that he then lied about it. And but if Andy McCarthy says it's a lousy case, then maybe it's a lousy case. I don't know. So it actually matters whether it's a lousy case or not. Some people said he wouldn't be indicted at all because the grand jury in Northern Virginia, which is very liberal, would not indict him if the case was so flimsy. But of course, in a grand jury indictment, the defense doesn't get to put on a defense. The grand jury only hears the evidence that the prosecutor presents to them, and then they make a determination based on that. So, we haven't had the actual back and forth. Okay, that's how I'm going to begin. So go to it.
Yeah, well, John, I mean, I'm in a similar position to you. At face value, it didn't bother me at all. And I'm not in the habit of outsourcing my opinion to people. But when it comes to legal matters and Andy McCarthy, I am very, very much in that habit, in part because when he sort of opens up a discussion of something, it mostly reveals how little I understood about it beforehand. And so I'm sort of still waiting to figure out what is so lousy about the case. Part of this problem here is that because of who it's coming from, because it's Trump and it's the Trump administration, and it's this administration that is looking for vengeance at every turn, I am less than disinclined to think that it could be a lousy case. But I don't know. I'm definitely somewhere very short of being outraged.
It reminds me a lot of, honestly, the FCC thing, in that whether there's a good case for it sort of gets lost in the process, because in order to get this indictment, he fired or pressured to, resign the attorney in place in that district, and then replaced the prosecutor with a career non-prosecutor who was Trump's personal lawyer at some point. And she scrambled to, secure the indictment, and I guess she got two of the three, right? She presented three counts, got indictments on two. And so it looks, this looks like the sort of thing that, came about in the wrong, in the wrong way. A lot like, when Brendan Carr said, I don't know what they're going to do about Jimmy Kimmel, but they better do something because, this stuff can't go on, or we'll find a way to do something about it. It's like they might have made the same decision to suspend Jimmy Kimmel afterwards, but we don't know. This looks bad leading up to it, and it just looks like a lot of pressure. And so, like, you could even isolate. I think you could isolate what led up to it from the case, except that this is such a, this gets passion so roiling, the James Comey stuff and the whether fascism, the dark night of fascism is descending upon America, that it's going to be impossible for people to separate the two. But I do think it's a Brendan Carr type of situation where you look and say, I don't really love how this all came about.
Well, I don't love how it all came about either. And the weird thing is that Comey isn't exactly the target that you might think he would be in this respect. Trump already fired Comey. Trump fired Comey in 2017. Trump fired when he figured out properly, because then came these weird leaks to the front page of the New York Times about Comey. When Comey came to him and said, you need to know that there's evidence that people are coming after, or like you're being, the Russians are subordinates trying to, survey you, or whatever it was he said when he went to see him at the beginning of January before the inauguration in 2017. And then Trump realized that Comey had been trying to set a perjury trap for him in that conversation. He was like, I can't trust you. You're out of here. You're fired. He already kind of materially wounded Comey's career. Now, if they succeed in getting an indictment of John Bolton, whom he's mad at for mishandling classified information, and that is really not true, if it's not true, that would be where you would say, okay, he's mad at Bolton for writing the book and this and that and the other thing, and Bolton attacks him on Fox and he can't stand that. So Bolton's got to go, and then whoever he would do it. It's just Comey's an interesting example here because why Democrats, just, I'm now wandering around, but why Democrats haven't sent him out on an ice floe? This guy got Trump elected. We need to understand. He did two things before Trump was elected that were astonishing and outrageous in my view. I mean, and I said so. I said so at the time on the commentary website. So I'm totally defended by my history, which is when he came out in July of 2016 and said, I could indict Hillary. I could, based on all the evidence, but I'm not gonna. As opposed to saying we're closing the investigation into the Democratic nominee for president. We have decided to close the investigation, which is what you would normally do with somebody you're not indicting. It's nobody's business why you didn't indict. If you don't have the case against someone, you don't come out and say, well, I have a case against her, but I'm not pursuing it. That is actually, I'm sorry to say, unfair to Hillary Clinton. She doesn't need that shadow hanging over her head. Indict her or don't indict her. You don't get to say, I would have, but I didn't because I want her to be president. Whatever the hell it was he was doing. That was a breach of, at a minimum, government professional responsibility of a sort that we had barely ever seen.
He said he didn't want the Bureau to involve itself in
politics.
The election.
He basically gave the Trump campaign a gigantic boost by saying, I'm not indicting her. Obviously, it would be better for Trump if he had indicted her, but saying, I coulda. she's pretty guilty, really, but I'm not indicting her because I don't want, because the Bureau needs to be pure.
Right.
Like, are you effing kidding me? It was, Obama should have fired him at that minute for doing that. And they obviously didn't because, like, he was part of their team. Okay, so then he makes a promise to Congress that if anything happens, he'll reopen the investigation. And then comes word that there's stuff on Anthony Weiner's laptop because he's married to Hillary's associate, Huma Abedin. And then he reopens the investigation 10 days before the election and then closes it 5 days before the election. But basically, the election, Trump goes silent, lets this story percolate all over the place, and then wins the election by 88,000 votes across 3 states. Comey got Trump elected. He writes an incredibly self-serving book. He fiddle bitches around with the FBI in January and February and March, which apparently Democrats enjoyed, so they were feeling good about him. He's terrible. Like, they should drop him, they should take him on a helicopter to the Aleutian Islands with a backpack and leave him there to build his own, hut and survive in exile for the rest of his days. Instead, now he's going to get to be a martyr.
Oh, but the very opposite happened. I mean, because after he wrote his book, and then you talk about the talk shows, he was feted on the talk show circuit. Talking about how he wanted to do the right thing by the country and by the Bureau, and he was an absolutely adored figure, even though he had done all this. Like it was the most incredible PR.
And the book, which I, to my great misfortune, read instead of a third-rate Hollywood C starlet's autobiography, which I would have enjoyed, as I enjoy most of them if I find them on Kindle. Diane McBain's autobiography, like, I would have enjoyed that more than James Comey's. The book is so pompous and self-aggrandizing and full of his own, like, professed virtue and how he like, I don't know him. I've never met him. I don't really know anybody I knew some people who worked with him, but I've never really had a conversation about him. But I'm saying, he must be an intolerable person, because the person who writes that book and talks about himself the way he talks about himself in that book must be personally intolerable. And now we're going to get another year of Comey, unless, say, the judge completely dismisses the case when it comes before them, when he's arraigned. I guess maybe they won't have when he's arraigned, but I assume his lawyers will call for, the cases being thrown out of court, and that could well happen. I mean, he is indicted on a very flimsy, on this count that we could all be indicted on. And in fact, several people that I'm very close to have been indicted on, which is the count that the form that you sign at the bottom of your anything that you send to the federal government, you sign at the bottom of the form, to the best of my knowledge, what I'm saying is true. I think it's called 1018, and you sign it. You are therefore liable criminally if you lie on that form. And so it is the cheapest form of indictment to indict someone on that charge, because it's also like, what happens if you lie in your income tax form, or if you lie on your, I don't know, you're accused of lying on any form you have to send to the federal government. So it's like, we can indict you for anything. Here's what we're indicting you on. So therefore, Andy McCarthy might be right, given the nature of the indictment, that it's pretty flimsy. But so let's talk about this.
I'm trying to remember. I can't. I might have been Joe Nocera, but years ago, when all the Comey stuff was going around, he wrote a column for Bloomberg that was basically like, I don't love the fact that everybody's getting arrested for lying to the FBI when, Comey lies to us, to the public, and whatever, and it feels like, he was saying, it's not that Comey was legally liable at the time, but he was saying there's just this feeling that these people can lie to us constantly, and if we like get a date wrong in an interview, we go to jail or we get bankrupted by, attorney's fees or something like that. That people like, I think his point was really that people like Comey have turned lying into a kind of like elite activity, like something that a way that people like to lord power over others, specifically the lying, not the power play more generally. Specifically, I can lie to you and it's noble. You lie to me and you're going to prison no matter who you are. And I feel like that atmosphere has hung over this case really from the beginning. This idea that every attempt to get people was like Al Capone on taxes, but it was get them on lies. Like, well, maybe he didn't really do X, but he lied to investigators or something like that. And there was this sense that Comey had a real hand in making lying to the feds this big thing that was going to nab everybody who could be nabbed. And so
Well, I
that's
think
what
that's
feels like comeuppance, right?
you're making an important point, which is that everybody knows that if you or people learned over the last 20-25 years that there was a transactional quality to the fact that you were being interviewed by the FBI on a criminal matter, which is they want to get you on something so that they have something to trade. So they ask you whether it was sunny on August 16th, and you say yes, and it turned out that it was raining, and they indict you for lying, and you say that's how, or they threaten to indict you for lying. And then you say, that's insane. I didn't know what I guessed it was sunny. And they're like, you were under oath. And let's just walk this down the road. You're going to have to hire a lawyer. We're going to take you to court. We don't have any court costs. You have court costs. By the time you're done and this gets dismissed, you're going to spend $150,000 on a lawyer. Or you can tell us what your boss was doing. I mean, this is literally what they did to people in the Trump administration. Maybe it wasn't the FBI in this case, but the not the Trump, the Trump's businesses, how they got the information from Trump's accountant or whoever it was. It's like we have the power to use criminal or tortious and whatever behavior to ruin your life. So tell us what we want to know. And when you're talking about the mafia and you're talking about people who are engaged in criminal activity on a daily basis and are part of a criminal conspiracy, sure, like, okay, I mean, this is the only way to break the hold of the mafia, and you go ahead. It's not just the FBI; it could be a U.S. attorney deposing you, whatever. This is something else. We're building political cases against our political enemies or people we think are bad. And we're using the same techniques. Like Andrew Weissman, the now a big talking head, who was the guy who was Robert Mueller's essentially prosecutor, was famous for his absolute, during his time before he became Robert Mueller's number 2 staffer on the investigation into Trump, was famous for his extraordinary aggressiveness at using this tactic to get information out of lower level people to secure indictments against higher level people. And this happened, of course, with Rudy Giuliani when he was the U.S. attorney in New York, when he indicted people for insider trading and stuff like that. Famously, Mike Milken went to jail, again, different circumstance. Mike Milken agreed to testify to plead guilty because in his case, which is a crappy case, they said, fine, you're not gonna plead, you're gonna try to take this and see, we're gonna indict your brother and we're gonna send your brother to prison. Because maybe you can tough it out, but he won't be able to tough it out. And there's a famous moment where he and his wife are in a room somewhere and I think his brother, something like that, when he is faced with this threat not to plead guilty, and everybody hears from outside the room that they're in, wailing, sobbing, gnashing of teeth as they realize that Milken, who did not believe he was guilty and did not want to plead guilty, did it anyway to save his family. This is like hardball, hardball tactics. And yeah, Comey weaponized them. The Obamans weaponized them. Comey, it's bad. So yeah, there's an irony here that he would get. Now they don't seem to be doing it in order to get information on his superiors, because he didn't have
there's
any real
also
superiors.
there's also the aside from trying to get info, there's the thing that we always bring up in such cases where the process is the punishment, right? I mean, just
That's where we get to Trump.
yeah,
So the process is the punishment, because the process is the money.
right.
The process is the money. It's also like it's like it's trust me, having had a family member go through an irresponsible and disgusting political persecution, like, it's the focus of your life. You can't think about anything else. Your family can't think about anything else. There is nothing else. You can't get anything done. And then even when you make your deal or you make your peace with it or something, it haunts your life for years. It is the process is the punishment. And that's where we get to why this could be really bad that Trump is doing this. And it's not just because he's doing it to Comey, because maybe Comey deserves it, or I certainly don't care. I don't care whether Comey suffers. He's done it to 100 other people. So there's rough justice in him getting it himself, including his interference in the 2016 election, which, as I say, was more against Hillary than against Trump. But nonetheless, again, why Hillary should be coming out and saying, I'm thrilled that he was indicted. I hope that he is, shot off in a rocket to Venus because of what he did to our country. Trump is weaponizing the process against his enemies because he experienced the weaponizing of the process against himself. And boy, did he ever. No one ever saw a process weaponized like he did, right? 7 cases enforced it, right? 2 federal cases, Washington and Florida, 2 or 3, there are 2 cases in New York, 1 civil, 1 criminal, and of course the case in Georgia. And they all collapsed. I mean, I guess the Tish James fine thing hasn't collapsed exactly. But I mean, basically, a person without Trump's rage and, I don't know, whatever, just like determination not to lose to anybody ever and to like power through this, meant that, it not only he didn't kill him, it gave him sort of like the accelerant that helped him win in 2024. Ironically, based on the public reaction to the one good case against him. I mean, the one arguably toughest case against him, which was the mishandling of classified information, which then involved, again, sort of where we come here. He's indicted for the mishandling of classified information. We all go, this is not good. Oh my God, it's not good. Like, he did that. And, then the right wingers and people who like him are like, they raided Mar-a-Lago. They raided his home. He's an ex-president. How could they? That just shows they're monsters and it's terrible. And that really helped him. And then, of course, God came in to make us all laugh, because then it turned out that Biden had done exactly the same thing. And guess who didn't get indicted for it? Biden didn't get indicted for it. So Trump is indicted for it, Biden isn't indicted for it, and then guess who is having the law weaponized against him?
And by the way, there's also a kind of weird parallel in Comey's I could have indicted Hillary but didn't with the Biden thing. Biden didn't get in trouble because he was a forgetful old man.
Right. Robert Hur did say, exactly.
Yeah.
Said, I could have indicted him, but I didn't.
So
why don't I hold her? Why didn't I hold her to the standard that I'm holding Comey to? Which, of course, Democrats did. Remember, people said, Hur's a monster. How dare he? How dare he do this? It's so terrible that it happened. But Hur was obliged by the law, by the terms of his hiring as a special prosecutor, to issue a report. Comey wasn't. Comey was engaged in a criminal, the FBI was engaged in a potential criminal prosecution of Hillary Clinton that it closed. Comey was under no obligation to issue a report. Her, by law, had to issue a report. So Her said, I'm not indicting because I couldn't get a conviction, because a court will look at this guy and say he was senile. Now, what should Democrats have done in that case? Ditched Biden from the 2024 ticket. They should have said, let's not wait until the one debate when he shames himself and then Kamala Harris has 107 days to be an idiot and lose the presidency. They could have said, well, you know what? We got pretty unassailable evidence that he's cognitively impaired. We better find ourselves a better candidate for president. But as I say, that's the big difference there, is that Her was obliged, under the terms of his special prosecutor status, to issue a report.
But still, taken together, it does create this impression that when they do it, there is this, they were wrong, but kind of protective force field that somehow kicks in.
That's why I think that they don't have the same ability to do that with Comey, though, because James Comey is a weird guy, right? That's part of this story. As silly as it sounds to say, Jim Comey's weirdness is a key part of this story. He posts a picture of seashells that he designed to say, 86 the president or whatever, and then he gets investigated for it. When they first left, after the first time, he reemerged in the woods looking at trees and tweeted a picture of himself looking at trees in the woods with some sort of, haiku type, message. Comey, the story about him hiding behind the curtains when Trump came into office to try to avoid talking to Trump, like an 8'9", like Harry and the Hendersons sized person hiding behind.
Yeah, he's very tall, is what Seth is alluding to. Yeah.
And so he's like, so here we get the guy who hides behind curtains, the guy who posts seashells, the guy who goes wandering in the forest, whatever. There's something about him that makes him also hard to defend, hard to take seriously, hard to like, in addition to all the stupid things that he said and done, over time. He kind of feels like a piñata, in that, Trump, he seems like the type of guy that Trump would just take extra whacks at, even though he doesn't have to. Trump is in office. The prosecutions didn't stop him. He won the election. Living well is the best revenge, all that stuff. But at the same time, can you hold back if you have one more swing at the Comey piñata? I think a lot of people can.
But it's not just Comey. It's what Russiagate still means and will forever mean to Trump. I mean, there's a lot of going back and taking care of Russiagate business, I think,
and
in his
what it means,
psychology.
So the anti-Trump, the never-Trump, the anti-Trumpers, because I'm on Twitter. I see people that I used to respect, former friends, or people I still would consider friends who probably wouldn't consider me a friend. I mean, I'll mention one who's not a friend, but like somebody used to, Gary Kasparov. They talk about Trump as though Russiagate was proved, as opposed to debunked. It doesn't matter that Russiagate was disproved. It doesn't matter that Monday he said, I hope Ukraine wins this war, because 10 years into their hatred of Trump and their assumption that he's a Russian agent, no fact can penetrate the absolute iron conviction that they know truthfully that everything that was in the Steele dossier and everything everybody ever said about him in relation to Russia is true, when it's not. It's like a It's like, I don't know, the Heaven's Gate cult. The day comes when the world doesn't end, and they still believe that the world ended on whatever that date was in 2012, when the Heaven's Gate cult waited on top of that mountain in Arizona, waiting for the end of the world. It's so they're still there, and he's still basically making it clear that he will. He said at the Charlie Kirk funeral, "I hate my enemies. I'm sorry, I hate my enemies." Look, I don't like Trump. I mean, I'm very appreciative of the way Trump is. I don't like him. His example, I think, is not great for the presidency in many ways and all of that. But I mean, if anybody on this planet Earth has the right to hate his enemies, Trump has the right to hate his enemies. He's got a prosecutor. He's got a prosecutor in New York making up crap to create 34 indictments on a transaction with somebody that was A, completely legal, and B, consensual. He's got a prosecutor in Georgia making up crap, getting 120 or whatever the insane 90. I can't even remember the number of indictments that she came up with. He's got an attorney general in New York who is going after his organization for paying back its loans on time as per the legal agreement with the bank that gave him the loans. And he's got the entire liberal elite deciding that he is a Russian agent when he's not a Russian agent. Now, I have very little sympathy for him as a person. I don't like the way he treats women. I don't like the way he treats people. I don't like his aggressive. I don't like his, pardoning and all of that. But if anybody hates his enemies with reason, Trump hates his enemies with reason. And I am not a Christian, so I do not necessarily believe that hatred is an unacceptable emotion. I hate anti-Semites, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I hate people who hate my people, and I'm not going to apologize for it. So, I understand the emotion. That said, this is very bad in another way, and we all have to acknowledge it, which is, it's the Overton window question. President of the United States says, I'm going after my enemies. I'm using the powers of my office to go after my enemies openly, as opposed to in the, hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue, quietly, the way other people did for decades, in which they, got you a IRS audit, or they did whatever they could to screw around with you in previous eras. Because he's not the only one who's going to use this power. And that's a point that Mark Halpern makes in his newsletter this morning. A governor is going to do this. A mayor is going to do this. And what's more, some of his underlings that he has hired for their loyalty, who are Meshuggah, are going to do Meshuggah things with the idea that this is how the administration is supposed to work. Now remember, if he picks the targets, he's picking the target. He shouldn't do that. He's the president. He should be above it. He shouldn't be directing departments to go after individual people. But they can certainly say, well, that guy over there, Abe Greenwald said something nasty on his podcast about, Trump. Maybe we should do a nice audit on him, and then they'll announce that they did it. And then, of course,
I become a martyr.
Another election. What?
And then I become a martyr.
Yeah, you become a martyr. Let's see how you enjoy an audit. Audit worse than martyrdom. Okay,
I'm joking.
I know, of course. 2029, new presidency, maybe not a Republican presidency, and it will be. Well, he started it, and they're all evil, and let's see what we can get on JD Vance, and let's see what we can get on Marco Rubio, and let's see what we can get on Stephen Miller, and let's see what we can get on the Lindsey Hartigan, the lawyer that he imported into the Eastern District in Virginia to secure this indictment. Did she ever pick her feet in Poughkeepsie? Let's find out.
But it's kind of a complicated concept, but what you're talking about applies even when the cases are good in some sense. It's like, this is not a road we want to go down sometimes, especially now. It's another thread that we unravel from the fabric of the good working order of things, So, because, look, I trust Andy McCarthy, of course, but even if the case were airtight, there would be 99.9% of the same people out there screaming, "This is a horror and an outrage." Anyway,
Seth, that's where the horror fatigue really does have a terrible effect on Democrats and the liberals' ability to harness what might be genuine conservative outrage about things. I mean, it's been 10 years of them screaming about what a monster he was, and how he hates everything, and he of course provides ammunition by saying things like "I hate my enemies" and all of that. But you can't, Chicken Little. Like, if everything that he's ever done is a threat to democracy, and then finally he does something that's, I wouldn't say exactly a threat to democracy, but it's a threat to civil relations between political opponents that undergirds the possibility of conducting yourselves fairly in a republic. Why is any conservative going to care? It's like what happened with Brendan Carr. A lot of people on the right said what went on with Brendan Carr was bad. Like, most people, I would say, most people who care about the First Amendment or care about government interfering in private industry and all of that. But like, they've come back to the well once they just, the well is dry.
Well, I think what also bothers people on the right about this stuff is that there's like this pressure to speak out if you're on the right specifically about each thing that they feel is not put on, on Democrats. So like, like Biden's people leaning on social media companies, right, is maybe not the same as something that Brendan Carr did. But if you went through that experience as a conservative, there was no like, all good liberals must really speak out about this attempt to censor and this attempt to pressure, because we don't know what kind of slippery slope this is going to put us on, to have a president declare an emergency since it's during COVID and say misinformation is a national security risk, and therefore we're going to lean on all these people and we're going to hire a director of censorship and, all that other stuff. You didn't have people on the left saying, we have a responsibility to speak up on our own side now, because this is going to be used on the other side. And then when it happens with Trump, again, even if it's an escalation, there's it's not just horror fatigue, but a lecture fatigue. There's a fatigue in feeling like everything Trump does, wow, it's really good to see conservatives speaking up about Brendan Carr and this and that, and it sort of gets tokenized and whatever. That's, I think, what people really get tired of is this sense that conservatives have a responsibility every day to check in and see what they should denounce from their own side, check it off the list, and then they can go about their day doing their regular day job or whatever. And that liberals don't have this pressure to do that.
Right. Well, I called it a couple of years ago Jane Costanization. There's a staffer at the New York Times named Jane Costin. She was a conservative. She became a liberal, and one of her self-appointed jobs, Connor Friedersdorf, another person, used to do this. He does it a lot less. worked for the Atlantic for 20 years. And it was why aren't you saying, Seth Mandel, that the behavior of thus and so? I expect better. I expect better of you, Seth Mandel. You seem like a very reasonable person. Shouldn't you, of all people, be saying that Brendan Carr's FCC has overstepped its bounds? Don't you want to make sure that you are intellectually consistent and that your side is da 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 da? And then it's like, hey lady, Ilhan Omar, case closed. Every 3 hours you should be tweeting about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And if you're not, shut your trap is all I can say. Because like I say, I hate my enemies and I hate anti-Semites. And if you're not every third minute calling out anti-Semites on your side, I'm not interested in getting a lecture from you. Because it was only 80 years ago that half my people were murdered because people like you didn't open up a mouth. And I'm not holding you responsible, but don't you hold me responsible for Brendan Carr. I didn't elect Brendan Carr. I didn't pick Brendan Carr for the FCC. And I've done more to criticize my own side than you ever have. So shut your trap. You know, I mean, it gets to that point, that kind of more in sorrow than in anger. Why aren't you, you know? And we've done it. But, you know, honesty impels me to say, I don't care if James Comey is in trouble. I'm sorry. He has done great damage to this country. And again, if I were a Democrat, I would think he'd done greater damage to this country than I think as a conservative myself. Because he got Trump elected. And I'm less concerned about that than you are. You know? So I don't know. Is that hysterical?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the hectoring, and that's what feels like, you know, it's like the people who would criticize Brendan Carr do so anyway. You know, lots of people criticize Brendan Carr not because they were told to do so by, you know, the self-imposed moderators of, you know, virtue online, but because they said, hey, you know, like Ted Cruz didn't call out Brendan Carr because he felt like there was real pressure to be a conservative who cleans up your own house first.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Ted Cruz said what he said. That sounded like a mafia boss. You know, so there's to some extent there's like this, you know, it turning who's denouncing it into the story becomes one of these like meta games where the media just kind of makes itself the story, turns on itself, and then it's like all we're talking about is like the people that we mutually follow on Twitter and what they're talking about. And it, you know, that sort of brain scrambling, you know, sort of inside baseball stuff from the industry that's supposed to be covering this and explaining it to the outside world, to the people who don't spend all day online. You know, it becomes a very sort of personalized thing, and it's tiresome.
And I have to just say this, and I'm not just saying this because it's my side, but the truth is that the right, whatever that is now, is such a more multifaceted creature than the left is, that every time something comes up on one's own side, that there's reason to call into question, to denounce, to oppose, you can always find far more sincere, principled objections on the right to their own sides doing things wrong than you can on the left. That is just always the case, because in part it has to do with a lot of confusion on the right, because the right now means 9 different things to 9 different factions.
Right.
The left is, you know, is like they're on the same page. They're just not all, they didn't all get to the same point yet, but they're all pushing in that same direction.
I've mentioned this before, and I'm going to mention it again. In 1990 or 1990, David Duke, the head of the KKK, was the Republican nominee for the governorship of Louisiana, and the Republican president of the United States called for everyone to vote for the Democrat. Zoran Mamdani, an anti-Semitic, anti-American, socialist supporter of terrorism, is the mayoral candidate for New York City. And where is Barack Obama, or whatever person could be considered the leader? Oh, Kamala Harris said, I support the Democratic nominee for the mayor of New York. So once again, go blow. Like there is a real world example of what a responsible Republican president, whom people like, Trump think is a loser or whatever, saying, it would be a stain on this country and on my party that this guy ends up, the head of the KKK, ends up as governor of Louisiana. Zoran Mamdani is morally no different from being the head of the KKK, as far as I'm concerned. And while some people are not endorsing him, and that's a real thing, it's not like there's a movement on the part of Democrats to deny him the mayoralty.
Never Zoran.
Exactly.
There's no never Zoran.
Yeah, right.
There's no I'm Chuck Schumer and I'm going to protect my party from this stuff. There's and we sort of, it's like we're not even asking that much. Like I would love to see more denunciation of Zoran Mamdani, but like at this point I will settle for not endorsing him.
Yeah, but listen,
now I've got Kathy Hochul endorsing him and all these people endorsing him, and you're going to see more, by the way. Like, the question around Hakeem Jeffries, right? How close it gets to the election before he does so, and this and that. Like, it's all about endorsing. But if this were on the right, it would have been, where are these guys denouncing him daily? Like, forget about will Hakeem Jeffries endorse him. Why isn't Hakeem Jeffries giving speeches about how this isn't, I don't want this in my party, and we can't, coexist in my party's a big tent, but it can't be this big a tent, et cetera, that sort of thing. So
I got another example for you. And I'm not doing this because I'm like defending Republicans. Like, I'm sick of Republicans. There's a lot of Republicans I can't stand all of that, but I'm trying to remember who his name. Now I'm having a brain fart. The Republican congressman who was like a crazy anti-Semite.
Steve King?
Steve King. The entire Republican leadership in the House and the Iowa Republican Party and everybody teamed up to get Steve King out of office. Where
he was stripped, the party stripped him of his committee assignments,
right?
So he couldn't bring home the bacon to his constituents, and the Republican Jewish coalition got involved against an incumbent,
right?
And all that. Though these were factors that were quite rare.
Right. The point that I'm making here is not, again, to praise Republicans, but to say that this argument that who's lost their souls is the GOP because they're not policing their own and they're not mad enough about Trump and all that, there is a little merit to the idea that Trump's hold on the party is interfering with the proper working order of American democratic oversight, let's say, by which I mean RFK Jr. should be impeached and removed from office as head of the HHS for this Tylenol thing. It is outrageous. It is anti-scientific. He is playing some weird game as part of his... He is suborning science, forcing people under him to say things that they probably know are not true, all of that. And because of the nature of American politics, the Republicans in the Senate are not going along and looking into him and removing him from office as they could do. So I'm not, not happy, but, and I'm not whatabouting is my point. Like, what about though? Alejandro Mayorkas perjured himself before Congress. Did the Obama administration do anything about that? Eric Holder found 3 times in contempt of Congress for actually lying about or refusing to provide materials about the killing of Border Patrol agents. Did they do anything about that? No. Was there any kind of media drumbeat about it? No. What actually Mayorkas was Biden. Um, so however, now going back the other way, this could be really terrible. Like, this could be a kind of watershed moment in which, okay, like, it's Calvin Ball. We're now in Calvin Ball with political power in the United States. You get it. You nail people for being your enemies. Everyone gets scared, And by the way, under those circumstances, the criminal violence centering around politics just naturally will increase, because people will start thinking, well, there's no way to prevent this stuff from happening. The only way to do it is to take somebody out. And it wouldn't necessarily be the president. It could be, cabinet secretary, it could be Stephen Miller, it could be anybody. I'm not.
Right, it could be an ICE facility, somebody shooting at an ICE facility. Like that's what we're seeing. In other words, we're seeing representations of.
Right.
But also the one thing I would say that Trump does worse here, that bothers me, that makes the situation worse, is that he exaggerates. I'm not saying there's no corruption and there's no directing prosecutions against your enemies when Democrats are in power or anything. Trump presents the country as being one in which this is what you do, right? He says it out loud. He doesn't use euphemism. And he also, every time it happens, he says, this is what they do. This is, look, this Republican got investigated here. This Republican got investigated here, this and that. And Trump sort of paints this picture of, this is all the Democrats ever do, which is an exaggeration. The Democrats are not actually, they're not a mafia organization. They're like a government. When they're in government, they do stupid things. Sometimes they do corrupt things, but Trump sort of presents as normal what his opponents are criticizing him of, rather than trying to deny what he's being accused of, right? He'll say, like, yeah, I ordered the code red, and so did you, and so did you. Everybody orders the code red. What do you think happens? And that sort of thing. And so that kind of bothers me. That bothers me a lot, because I think that it's giving people on the right this idea that for decades, it's only been one side, ordering the code red. And now it's really time for the right to get into office and put everybody in jail and make up for lost time and whatever. And I think that really does also, in the long term, just ruin faith in, I think people just sort of give up on these institutions after a while if they really begin to believe that that's all that happens.
Well,
it's almost like your responsibility to go after your, this is just what you do in office. Right. I think he exaggerates that picture.
Well, he does. And it's also, I think the ultimate point that you're making is that for many people in this country, that's already happened. It's like, it's not ruined. They're like, it's already ruined. So, it's unilateral disarmament not to do it, because they did it to us, so we're going to do it to them. And then we understand when they come into office, they'll do it to us. And so then we'll come into office and do it to them. And that's the horror that we're facing in the future. But of course, it's not clear to me that if Trump had forborne, said, I'm a different person now, I'm coming in, I just want to do things, I'm not going to harness the power of the federal government to punish my enemies, that when he left office, the Democrats wouldn't just go around and say he did everything terrible and all that. The weird thing, of course, is that he started this administration not by going after people, but by springing them. I mean, the thing, I was thinking about the lawyers who have quit this administration, right? You've had this lawyer quit, who had just been appointed in the Eastern District rather than indict Comey. And then, of course, you have the case of Danielle Sassoon in the Southern District of New York, who quit because she could not, in good conscience, agree to the pardon of Eric Adams. So Trump has done a lot of different things in a lot of different ways to make it clear that he does not respect the good working order of the criminal justice system or the way we do things. And on the other hand, not to excuse him, but to explain him, if there's anybody who would have reason to say this system stinks, it's him, based on what happened to him. Now, there's the political prosecutions, right, which were the Mueller report and the at least the first impeachment. I think the second impeachment was a convictable offense. But that was the political persecution of him. And then, of course, we had the legal persecutions of him at the state and federal level in from 2021 to 2024. And so he thinks the system stinks anyway. So what the hell? Quick recommendation, and then we'll go. Excuse me. And by the way, can you people stop writing and saying, stop clearing your throat? If you don't like listening, stop listening. We have to clear our throats. If we use AI to not clear our throats, it sounds worse. We're human beings. You're listening to this for free. Leave us alone, okay? I don't want any more emails from you about how we sometimes clear our throat. Abe did it once. I just did it. You're a human being. You don't like it. Go listen to Pod Save America and enjoy yourself. Okay.
And thank you to the people. We also do occasionally get letters that say people should stop telling you to clear your throat. So we appreciate those. Those are fine. Those can keep coming.
Yes. And by the way, now that we're on video, it's not like I can be sucking on a lozenge, because then people would be like, what are you doing sucking on a lozenge while you're doing a podcast? So anyway, recommendation, Apple TV season 5 of Slow Horses has started, goes week by week. Slow Horses is the British spy show about the ne'er-do-wells who have been kicked out of MI5 and are in this rubber room place called Slough House, where they sit under the tutelage of the repulsive but brilliant disgraced agent Jackson Lamb, played in a performance by the ages by Gary Oldman. Each season corresponds to a novel by Mick Herron, who wrote the series Slow Horses and created all the characters. And this one, after a kind of misfired last season, which involved a sort of like a super criminal and creating super soldiers, and turns out that one of the Slough House people is the secret son of the secret super criminal, and that was not great. But we're back to, there's a terrorist incident in London. It involves a mayoral campaign between a Nigel Farage type and a Sadiq Khan type, and the psychopathic genius computer guy at Slough House seems to be being hunted down, seems to be being set up for assassination, and we don't know why, and it seems to be connected to this, and we only have this first episode. And this show is it's just a balm. It's a tonic. It's fun. It's amazingly well acted. The situation is just fantastic. And just watching Gary Oldman, who is really only on the show 10 or 15 minutes an episode, even though he's the star of it, he just kind of pops in, says something, does something, and then pops out, but is obviously the greatest spy in British history. He's just an unsupportable person as a human being. Anyway, Slow Horses, Apple TV. You don't need to watch the previous seasons to start now. You really don't. I mean, you will be falling into the middle, but it's a self-contained story, and you can pick up. It's almost like picking up a story in the middle, but you'll figure out who everybody is after about 5 minutes. So if you haven't watched it, you could just start here. As I told my 15-year-old son, who's like, I can't, I have to watch everything from the beginning. But I'm telling you, I told him he could watch it, and you can too. So have a wonderful weekend, everybody. For Seth and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.